In 2006, David is running for the New York Senate. His campaign is going exceptionally well, thanks to his empathy toward people in need, and everyone is sure he'll win. He appears on the covers of every magazine and the most popular talk shows. Unfortunately, things take a turn for the worse when a newspaper writes an article about David showing his naked rear as a prank for a college reunion, which greatly damages his reputation. David's furious reaction is watched by Harry, who receives a mysterious call and says he's working on new ideas. On the day of the election, experts predict that David will lose, and that's exactly what happens. Once again, he's being watched by Harry and his boss Richardson, who says they must put David back on track. Feeling nervous, David hides in the bathroom to try to clear his mind. While practicing his speech, he hears some noises coming from a stall. At that moment, Elise comes out, carrying her shoes and a bottle of alcohol, while explaining she's hiding from security because she crashed a wedding on a self-dare. They start chatting and quickly hit it off. Elise admits that she loved David's reunion prank, and David claims he's happy he lost because he'll have more time to himself. But Elise doesn't believe him because she can tell he loves being in a crowd. Suddenly, they start kissing very passionately, as if this talk had been enough to fall for each other. The moment is interrupted by campaign manager Charlie, so Elise immediately leaves without giving David a chance to get her contact information because she must run away from the guards. Afterward, David goes out to give his speech, reading what he prepared in advance. However, he stops himself when he realizes he's just saying the usual socially acceptable words and decides his public deserves an authentic reaction. David now talks from his heart, and people quickly start loving him again. A month later, Harry meets with Richardson, who asks him to spill David's coffee on his shirt so he'll miss the bus. David isn't interested in politics anymore and now works as a senior partner in a firm founded by Charlie. Harry falls asleep while waiting at the park, and by the time he wakes up, David is already on the bus. As Harry runs after it, David finds Elise, and they can't believe they're seeing each other again. They catch up on each other's lives, and Elise says David should totally run for Senate again. Since he's running out of time, Harry makes a movement with his hand that even at this distance causes David to spill his coffee on Elise's lap. Suddenly, Harry is run over by a cab, but he quickly recovers as if it was nothing. When he checks his notebook, he's shocked to notice that David went off the plan. On the bus, David finally asks Elise for her number before his phone starts ringing nonstop. Elise throws it in his coffee before realizing she must get off, so David promises to call her later. When David makes it to the office, he rushes through the corridors and says hi to all the employees without noticing they're frozen. He enters the conference room to find Charlie and a group of strange masked men are scanning him with a mysterious rote. These men are led by Richardson, who immediately tells them to capture David. A chase ensues through the office, but no matter what corridor or stairs David chooses, more men and even Richardson himself keep appearing to block his way. He rushes to his office and locks the doors before calling 911, but he gets no response. Then the strange men somehow open the locked doors and tackle David, holding him down on the floor while Harry puts him to sleep with chloroform. Moments later, David wakes up in an empty warehouse and hears Richardson talking to his boss on the phone. Apparently, he's being scolded for failing. When he hangs up, he announces that David needs to be reset, but one of the men points out that the chairman would never authorize that. David asks for an explanation, and Richardson says he's the guy that makes sure everything goes according to plan. A wary David tries to run away, but Richardson only needs to flick his hand to bend a small piece of the floor to make him fall. The men put David back on the chair while Richardson explains he can read David's mind, which he proves by guessing what color and number he's thinking. This group of people is the Adjustment Bureau, or TAB, and David wasn't supposed to see them when they were adjusting Charlie. He was supposed to spill his coffee in the park and go back to get clean clothes to then arrive late at the office, so TAB would have been gone by the time he arrived. Each person in the world has an assigned path, and TAB adjusts it by doing little things like coffee spills and cutting the internet. Humans aren't supposed to know about TAB, so Richardson makes David promise he won't say a word to anyone. If he breaks that rule, they'll reset his brain and personality. Richardson also tells David to never see Elise again since she isn't in his path. The men take the card with Elise's number from David's pocket, and Richardson burns it. Afterward, David is thrown in Charlie's office. Everyone is moving normally again, and David can't see TAB anywhere. The rest of the day, he can't stop thinking about what happened, and even Charlie notices how distracted he is during a meeting. After work, David goes to a bar and tries to remember Elise's phone number. Suddenly, Harry sits next to him and wonders why David is so fixated on this woman he isn't supposed to talk to. It's dangerous to discuss TAB in a bar, so they agree to meet later on a boat for privacy. There, Harry explains that water prevents him from reading David's actions. He also reveals that agents can't actually read people's minds. They just study their histories and patterns so they become easy to predict. Harry advises David not to search for Elise if he doesn't want TAB going after him. 3 years later, David is on the bus when he suddenly sees Elise walking on the street. He immediately gets off and runs to catch up to her. He admits that for the last 3 years he rode the same bus every day hoping to see her. They go for a walk while David explains he lost her number and couldn't find her online because he didn't know her surname. A TAB agent immediately notices the change in David's routine and warns Richardson, who sends his men after them. Elise shares that she's a dancer in a contemporary ballet company and tells him about the show she's having tomorrow night. The duo stops at a cafe to have breakfast while Richardson watches them from afar, noticing several inflection points in Elise's path too. If they kiss, there'll be an irreparable deviation from the plan. TAB sends Charlie to interrupt the date by reminding David has a speech he can't skip. When they're about to kiss goodbye, Richardson sends Charlie a message pretending to be the TV crew, and Charlie ruins the moment by rushing his friend. Before leaving, David kisses Elise's cheek and promises to see her again. That afternoon, David announces he'll run for Senate again, while Elise receives a trick text from TAB telling her the rehearsal has changed locations. After finishing his speech, David sees Richardson watching him from afar and suspects something is wrong, so he tells Charlie to cancel all his interviews. Then he rushes to the ballet company's studio and finds it closed. David calls the company to try to ask about the rehearsal, but the call is quickly disconnected. He even borrows a random man's phone to try again, to no avail. Noticing that David is still running around the city, Richardson and his assistant appear in front of him to try to convince him to forget about Elise. David asks why he feels like this if it wasn't on his plan, but Richardson doesn't know either. A frustrated David enters a cafe to ask if anyone knows where the ballet company is, and luckily a client gives him an address. Then David tries to take a taxi, but Richardson won't let any car stop for him. David manages to run after a particular cab, but when the car stops, another vehicle crashes against it. After checking on the cab driver, David looks inside the other car only to find it empty. He calls 911, and when the cops arrive, an officer wants to take him to the station as the only witness. A wary David asks the sergeant if it's really necessary, and when she tells him they'll call him later, David turns around to find the officer gone, which means he was a TAB agent. Now David can finally take a cab and pays the driver $100 to drive while ignoring everything that may appear around them, even the stoplights. The agents run as fast as they can, using their powers to go through several buildings and lock doors. However, when they make it to the studio, it's too late. David has already seen Elise. Richardson warns him that more powerful people will come after him before going to the office to meet with his superior. It turns out that Elise and David were meant to be together a couple of times in the past decades, but the plan changed in 2005. Now the remnants of the old plans keep pushing Elise and David together. Richardson looks for Harry to inform him that it wasn't his fault after all. That night, Elise and David have a lot of fun together, racing on the streets, dancing at the club, and sharing stories from their childhoods. The couple then shares a kiss and goes home to get dirty. After they fall asleep, they're watched by Agent Thompson. The next morning, Elise receives several calls from his ex, who she hadn't talked to in a long time. She reveals she was engaged to the guy but broke up with him because she kept thinking about David. In return, David confesses that being with her is the first time he felt like himself. Since David is worried that the agents may take her away, he invites Elise to the TV station so she can watch him do his interview. When the show's done, an agent pretending to be part of the crew tells her that David will be there for hours and will call her when he's done. After she leaves, the guy pretends to guide David to his next show, only to push him into a warehouse and lock him up. Moments later, Thompson shows up and David asks him what happened to free will. Thompson explains that TAB took humanity from cavemen to the height of the Roman Empire, but then they stepped back to see how humans would do on their own. This brought the Dark Ages for 5 centuries, so TAB came back and brought the Renaissance, Enlightenment, and Scientific Revolution. In 1910 they left again, but in just 50 years humanity brought 2 world wars, the Depression, fascism, the Holocaust, and the missile crisis. TAB decided to never give humanity free will again. Meeting Elise years ago wasn't chance. She was supposed to inspire David not to give up and launch a political career that will take him to big places in the future. Thompson points out David won't become president if he stays with Elise. However, David still believes in the fate created by making his own choices and chooses her, so Thompson opens the gate and lets him go. David immediately rushes to the theater to watch Elise's show, and Thompson appears next to him again to explain that Elise can become the most famous dancer in the world, but if she stays with him, she'll only teach dancing to kids. Thompson says the choice is David's, but on his way out he nods and makes Elise fall in the middle of her performance. Afterward, David takes a wounded Elise to the hospital. While the doctors run some tests, Thompson appears again and blames David for this accident, so David punches him. Thompson points out David always ruins his big opportunities with impulse, like the prank that ruined his last election. It seems Elise brings out this reckless side of his. Tonight it's just a leg sprain, but next time it may take away the only thing she ever cared about. After Thompson leaves, David checks on Elise and confirms it's just a sprain, so she should be better in around a month. David then hugs her before saying he needs to make a few phone calls, but he actually leaves the hospital and doesn't contact her again. 11 months later, David is leading the popularity polls. One morning, Charlie brings him the newspaper with important news. Elise is back with her ex and they'll get married in a week. David is upset and tries to ignore it, but a few days later he's approached by Harry, who says Thompson lied about Elise bringing out his reckless side. In fact, Elise would help David feel fulfilled in life, so he wouldn't feel the need to fill his emotional void with a loving crowd and dreams of the White House. The deaths of his brother and father had been sacrifices by TAB to push David into the successful man he's today. David wants to choose Elise again, but the wedding is tomorrow. If he wants to make it in time while avoiding Thompson, he'll need Harry to teach him how to teleport through doors like agents do. Harry advises him to always turn the doorknob clockwise and explains that doors are never locked when they're wearing their special hat. They take a random door and appear in a museum, followed by the pumping station. Harry asks David to wait before turning the doorknob counterclockwise, which lets him meet with other agents. Once those men are gone, Harry teaches David the route he must follow through the door so he can find the one he needs and reminds him to run from every person wearing a hat because it may be an agent in disguise. The duo studies all night, and in the morning Harry gives David his hat, wishing him good luck. As soon as David starts crossing doors and running under the rain, TAB loses track of him and sends out a team to find him. Moving as fast as possible, David dodges traffic but ends up crashing against people when he reaches the courthouse. The groom is already waiting for his turn but worries because Elise hasn't shown up yet. There's a metal detector at the courthouse entrance, so David has to leave his jacket and phone behind, but he manages to retrieve his hat. After running through several corridors, David finally finds Elise in the bathroom, but she's angry because he abandoned her. At that moment, an agent comes in, so David knocks him out with a punch and takes his notebook to show Elise the truth about what happened. He says that he loves her and that he wants to spend his life with her. Since he's taken off his hat, TAB finds his location and sends the men after him. David makes sure to block the door and puts on the hat again before taking Elise through a door to teleport right into a stadium, which helps her believe the story. The couple runs through many doors all over the city, and when Elise almost has a panic attack, David calms her down and asks her to trust him. As the agents begin chasing after them, the duo goes through another door and Elise freezes in front of the Statue of Liberty. David gives her more details about what's going on and lets her choose if she wants to come with him or leave him to never see him again. Elise chooses to go with him and they turn the door counterclockwise, which takes them to TAB headquarters. A few agents try to stop them, but David pushes them off before crossing another door and taking the stairs. With the agents still coming after them, they run through endless corridors, rooms, and more stairs until they make it to the roof. At that moment, the agents surround them. So Elise and David say "I love you" to each other and share a passionate kiss, which causes all the men except for Thompson to disappear. When Thompson tells them that trying to write their own fate won't ever work, Harry shows up with a message for him. Thompson reads it and leaves. Then Harry explains that the message was from the TAB leader known as the Chairman. Apparently, he was inspired by the couple's willingness to risk everything, so he rewrote their plan. They're allowed to stay together and the rest of the notebook is empty for them to do whatever they want. The couple now can leave without danger, ready to start their new life together. Harry wonders if free will is a gift that the Chairman gives to those willing to fight for it. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.